Welcome to another episode of the Sports Sentiment. I am your host, Nick Urias, and we are back once again talking some college football. Good to be back with everybody once again. It's been about over 2 months since our last podcast, believe it or not. That was right after the San Jose State football spring game. So, yes, it's been a minute, but in the back end of June, we are here talking some more football. Took some time away, but we are back. We are better. And we're going to, keep pumping things out here on this platform between our episode here today, talking San Jose State football and a breakdown on the schedule and in specific, my rankings on the easiest to the toughest game on the SJSU football schedule. So all 13 games will have, I guess, somewhat of a breakdown. Again, some new teams in the Mountain West this year. With UTEP and Northern Illinois, some teams departing. Of course, you got your interesting non-conference games as well. So, again, we're going to have some bullet points just on every single game. So, I'm most certainly excited, to talk, just some ball. Of course, summertime. So, we're doing all the research right now on just all things college football. We're going to have Mountain West Media Days sometime in July that will be going out to straight from the Strip in Las Vegas, Nevada. We got some college basketball updates that will most certainly be addressing on this podcast with, in particular, San Jose State men's basketball and their new roster. When that gets fully finalized, we'll most certainly break it down and just give our instant thoughts on that. But today it's all about Spartan football here on this podcast. And look, this is a 13 game schedule for San Jose State this year. They are playing in week 0 versus the USC Trojans. I think that game is August 29th, and that is a high noon kickoff on NBC. So, I mean, you're getting a national spotlight weekend, obviously, for playing in week 0, but you're also on one of the big boy networks as well, which is always good for eyeballs. But we're going to, of course, break down the schedule and do all that good stuff. A lot of new coaches, a lot of new teams. And, again, you're not going to agree with what I got as far as my rankings is concerned, but that's okay. We're here to, just talk about it, give some analysis, give some of my angles that I personally found. And, we're here to talk about it. So I'm most certainly looking forward to that. As always, before we get into the breakdown, like, comment, subscribe helps us a ton. If you agree, you disagree with something that I have coming up here, feel free to chime in. I'm always here for a friendly conversation, whether you're on the audio side or if you're on youtube.com/@thesportsSentiment. So let's get right to it because we got 13 games to, I guess, just give our thoughts on and break down. Nothing too extensive, but I do have, again, my rankings and then, just whether it's coaching changes, player personnel, you'll get the gist when we fully get into it here down the line. So San Jose State football, as we mentioned, 13 game schedule, playing in week 0. They got some very interesting scheduling spots. You're going to notice they're going to be playing some tough teams, as you might imagine. The Mountain West, interestingly for football this year, obviously, with the Pac-12 being realigned, they lose some heavyweights with Boise State and Fresno State, and, Colorado State had a down year, but they're still a respectable program. Utah State was always a tough opponent for SJSU. And they're reloading, with UTEP, Northern Illinois, North Dakota State. So, there's still most certainly some firepower. I'm interested to just see what the Mountain West and the Pac-12, the new realigned conferences, just from top to bottom, what it looks like. I think you're going to see when we talk basketball months down the road, And we're breaking down games and giving our thoughts, and we're keeping an eye on the old Mountain West teams and the new Pac-12. I think you're going to see San Diego State departed as well. Forgot to mention that. But from the Mountain West to the Pac-12. But I think what you're going to see here is that, this early on the football season, I didn't even think going into conference play, it's going to be, just very interesting with, how the two conferences from top to bottom are, just where they're at, right? Just from, how much better is the Pac-12 to the Mountain West? Maybe it's the other way around. Who's ultimately the G6 representative? Because, of course, Boise State in the new, 12-team playoff, college football playoff, Boise State was the representative in the Mountain West. And then last year, it was Tulane and James Madison, just worked out that way, right, with the American and the Sun Belt. So very interested to see if it's the Mountain West or the Pac-12, or it's somebody from the American or the Sun Belt this year. So just very interesting from that, from the football side, first and foremost, because that'll be getting underway first. But just seeing how it translates to basketball, because I think basketball will probably be heavily hit. The Mountain West Conference will. I think you'll see a much more bigger drop off, but I'm not so sure for football. But that's just kind of my instant thoughts on that. But without further ado, let's just get straight into the schedule ranking. So, San Jose State football this year has one FCS opponent, and then they will have, of course, some non-conference games versus USC, Eastern Michigan. They have a non-conference game versus North Dakota State, which I'll expand on a little bit more later. But essentially, it's the Jacksonville State game that is the replacement, because North Dakota State, of course, joined the Mountain West very late. They had to redo all the schedules because North Dakota State was going to play a Mountain West schedule with them being a member, of course. And, North Dakota State, they had to equal it all up and, do all that stuff. Jacksonville State pulled out of the game versus San Jose State. So that essentially meant that North Dakota State was going to play San Jose State, but to have an equal amount of Mountain West games for the entire league, they just said, okay, let's put it at the end of the year, final game of the regular season, and it'll be a non-conference game. So we got to put that in bold and, get that out of the way right now. San Jose State versus North Dakota State will be a non-conference game this year. That will be not the case going forward, but just something to put out there, because I already know there's going to be people, months down the road, when they see this game on the schedule, they're going to be extremely confused on why it's not a Mountain West game. So that is that. And since we're on the topic of North Dakota State, the North Dakota State Bison, it's their first year in the Mountain West. And because you got to go through that whole, 2-year transition period from the FCS to the FBS, they are not eligible for the Mountain West Championship, any postseason play. So no bowl games, and stuff like that. But I do believe they're eligible for the college football playoff, believe it or not, because that's separate from, all the other stuff. Gotta love college athletics. But that's that. But wanted to get at that out of the way first and foremost. All right, number 13, the easiest game, again, my opinion, of course, for San Jose State football, and I don't think there's going to be much disagreement here, and that is number 13, the Cal Poly Mustangs. This is a week 3 matchup on September 12th. This is the San Jose State home opener for 2026. And again, this is the one FCS opponent for San Jose State on the schedule. They played Cal Poly in 2023, and that was a 59-3 win for SJSU. And that was at a point where I believe San Jose State was 0-2 heading into that game in 2023 because they had themselves a gauntlet of the first 2 weeks playing at USC, ironically enough, and at home versus Oregon State. And both of those teams ended up being absolutely fantastic. They were both top 25, more so the Oregon State side. That was the breakout year for Jonathan Smith and his Beavers. But regardless, San Jose State played that game in 2023 and they laid the hammer down. And that was back in the Brent Brennan era. Interestingly enough, Cal Poly, kind of entering a new era this year. They kind of brought in a new coaching staff, decided to part ways, with their previous head coach, and they bring in Tim Skipper. If that name sounds familiar, he was the former Fresno State and UCLA interim head coach. When UCLA parted ways with the guy in charge in Westwood, ultimately, Tim Skipper was there to the rescue. He scored a massive upset versus Penn State back when Penn State last year was like top 5 in America. Obviously, that ship sailed. And then, previously was at Fresno State. And that was when he was at Fresno State. That was the year Jeff Tedford ended up stepping down due to health reasons. And, that was a tough situation to endure. For Coach Skipper, but I thought he did a respectable job, got his team to a bowl. They went bowling. I think they ended up winning the bowl game as well. Fresno State's got some high standards. I think everybody knows that follows, college football, and, just college athletics. Fresno State's got high standards when it comes to their football program. And, he did a good job. He was one of their own. I mean, he was a linebacker at Fresno State. And now I think he wanted to take a next step with the head coaching gig. And here he is right now coaching the Cal Poly Mustangs. And he's entering year 1. The Cal Poly program's not as big of a mess as it was, I would say, maybe 3 years ago. They went 4-8 in the FCS as Big Sky members. They're overhauling an entire roster. I mean, one of their safeties, Brian Dukes Jr., is a member of San Jose State, and he played at Cal Poly and graduated at Cal Poly, last year. He was a 4-year player there, and, now he's back at San Jose State. So interesting angle there. I guess this is kind of like, you don't want to call it a revenge game. He only graduated there, but Brian Dukes Jr. will be playing his old team that he was a member of for 4 years. Brian Dukes expected to be a valuable member on the Spartan defense this year. So that's where we're at with that. This should be a game that San Jose State wins with margin, and depending on the record, of course, I think you're going to still have full focus for this game. If you're 0-2, I think Cal Poly just might be running into a buzzsaw of a San Jose State team that wants to, potentially run up the score. But we should mention as well, not necessarily, I guess under the Brent Brennan regime and the Ken Niumatalolo era as well, San Jose State has had trouble with the FCSs. Not every year, but obviously last year with Idaho, the Idaho Vandals, that had to come down to a game-winning field goal. Even Portland State, I remember a couple of years, maybe 3-4 years ago, I think it was 4 years ago, ended up coming into San Jose and nearly won the game outright, the Portland State Vikings. So I think you're going to have yourself a full focus group, but this is going to be a blowout, for SJSU. I think no matter what the record is, I think there's just a lot of overhaul here with the Cal Poly Mustangs. Moving on to number 12, and that is the Northern Illinois Huskies. So this is number 12, meaning this is the second easiest game I have for San Jose State on the schedule this year that will result in a win. The Northern Illinois Huskies. This is a Week 9 matchup in San Jose, Saturday, November the 7th. Of course, as we mentioned off the top, and if you're not aware with all the realignment, which is tough to keep an eye on these days, but Northern Illinois, this is their first year in the Mountain West as a football-only member. And Northern Illinois in a tough situation this year, not only because did they go 3-9 overall with wins against Ball State, UMass, and Holy Cross. So only 2 out of 3 of their wins last year were FBS, but because their head coach, Thomas Hammock, ended up departing, a few months or pretty much right during the transfer portal window to become a running backs coach for the Seattle Seahawks. And this was a guy that was well established at NIU, 7 years. Of course, this was a guy when he was like a double-digit underdog in a lot of games in the non-conference. His teams would come to play. And he was, again, one of these guys that was very vocal on the NIL era. Just the mass amount of movement with his rosters. It's the Northern Illinois, kind of towards, the bottom as far as funding within the MAC conference. So, when you got yourself some real talent that put up some numbers, I mean, a G5 or, obviously the power fours were going to come in and just, raid all your talent. And, for some coaches that just gets, I would say actually a lot of coaches, that just simply gets exhausting, when, the big boys are just plucking your talent, right? And, it was already a hard job to begin with, and he was going to probably make more money as a running backs coach for the Seattle Seahawks than he was, being the head man at NIU. So this ended up being just a massive shakeup during the offseason, and, NIU, all of a sudden it's like, okay, we got to go replace our players plus a coach. So what they do, instead of doing this national search, they said, okay, let's just promote the interim or the defensive coordinator as our interim head coach for the year. That's Rob Harley. So Harley will be the head man this year. Already, again, established, which is probably, the safe thing to do, just for the season. I don't know how we'll see. I mean, this is essentially his audition, right, for the head coaching gig for the long-term future. But we'll see how it goes. I mean, Hammock, again, like this guy upset Notre Dame a couple years ago, and this was kind of how the NIU program was able to make the national stage within a lot of, just amongst college football. You go into South Bend and you beat Notre Dame, who was, a college football playoff team and a contender for a national championship, every single year. That's a major noise, right? Like you're going to obviously, shut the world down. But at the same time, Northern Illinois, when they were kind of favored to win one of these games at home, in MAC play, they would be very disappointing. And their offense last year was no good. They ended up bringing in a new offensive coordinator, which is an interesting hire. And again, I don't follow the FCS religiously, but Tony Peterson, their new offensive coordinator, was calling plays for the Illinois State Redbirds, who ended up losing the FCS championship game in like overtime to Montana State. So like it was just like ridiculous. Like the Illinois State Redbirds run in the FCS playoffs, and they had themselves like some real dudes. Like they were running creative stuff. So that is a little bit intriguing to me. But at the same time, like we're going to see like how this goes here. The deal is for me here in this matchup is that Northern Illinois has to make the far trip from DeKalb, Illinois, all the way to the Bay Area, which is going to be tough for them. We only got one meeting, I think, in its entire history. The last meeting it was. But I think they've only met once in the entire series history, and that was an 18-17 win for Northern Illinois in San Jose in 1995. So we'll see, if history can repeat itself 30 plus years later. But I just think overall, like with the head coaching change and, just Northern Illinois, like they're bringing back, a decent amount of their receivers from last year. But the problem is that, a lot of the guys that they're bringing back didn't play last year or saw very limited time, or they're coming off significant injury. And, Thomas Hammock, we should mention as well. He was a defensive guy. It helps that they have Harley back, but I just think it's going to be a rough year one for NIU in the Mountain West. And I think this should be an SJSU victory. It helps that you're playing this game in the Bay Area as well. I think the situation would be totally different if San Jose had to go, make the trip to the middle of nowhere in Illinois. I think, things would be a little bit different in that regard. But moving on to number 11, the UTEP Miners. Now UTEP is an interesting team this year, not only because it's their first year in the Mountain West, but this is a game in El Paso on October 17th. But I just think UTEP, for everything that I heard in the offseason, they seem like they're kind of all in on football, and I think just kind of starting to buy in a little bit more with athletics on the football and basketball side. Scotty Walden enters year 3 as the Miners head coach. Dreadful year for the Miners last year, 2-10 overall. Only one Conference USA win last year. And the CUSA, if you saw those games on Tuesday, Wednesday nights, on primetime windows, it was some tough football to watch. And so UTEP was a mess. Now, their quarterback play was not good either. I think they had Tyler Locklear, and of course they had Malachi Nelson. And Malachi Nelson ended up starting out the year, and then he was throwing north of 3 picks in a lot of games last year, and they had no choice but to go elsewhere in the quarterback room. So inconsistent quarterback play. Their defense would be feisty in some spots, but they'd give up a lot of explosive plays. And UTEP just was never really consistent in any area on offense to really get some wins. And as you see that by the record. But I said earlier that, UTEP seems to kind of be all in with their transition here in the Mountain West. Scotty Walden's given a portion of his salary to the revenue share for their football team this year, which is interesting. That kind of tells me like, hey, it's go time here for this program. They actually have already named their starting quarterback this year, and that's EJ Colson, who's coming over from Incarnate Word from the SCS level. Now, Incarnate Word has kind of been one of these programs over the years that's kind of been like a quarterback whisperer, like kind of program, like, hey, highly recruited guys that don't pan out at their, first spot that they get recruited at. Incarnate Word will say, hey, there's a place for you. Come reignite our career here. And, you could ball out for a year and then you can go elsewhere. Right. That's kind of been their approach with the quarterback situation for some time now. They ended up having the number 1 pick in the NFL draft like 2 years ago in Cam Ward, or last year rather, Cam Ward. Like Zach Calzada was there, who's like a 5-star guy, and he went to Kentucky after. Emmett Brown, former San Jose State quarterback, 2 years ago now. Is at Incarnate Word for the 2026 season. So you get where I'm going here. Colson was the man last year at IDub, and now he's coming over and translating to UTEP. So I can actually see Colson having himself a really good year here. I don't know if it's going to translate to wins, though. And again, haven't taken a gigantic dive on the UTEP roster. Like, okay, what do they have coming back on defense, and what does that look like? But the fact that this game is in altitude, and on the road for SJSU has me a little bit like intrigued. Like, this game could be a game. It could be a game for, a half, for 3 quarters. But this is a game that I do see SJSU ultimately getting done. Like, we got to remember, folks, San Jose State, like, they're going to still have themselves an explosive offense here. I'd say the defense right now is the bigger question mark, of course, right? With the new defensive coordinator and so many new pieces in place, and even the wide receiver room, like, they got new pieces. The Spartans do for 2026, but the scheme with new players involved in the spread and shred under Craig Stutzman has proven to be, just an ATM machine where they're putting up points on a lot of drives. So very, very intrigued on obviously every game. But, I think this is, a matchup, for San Jose State. It's in the middle of October. It's relatively early in week 6. This will be, I believe, like their second Mountain West game. It's their first one on the road, if I'm not mistaken, as well. And I just think that I think the San Jose State football team will be a little bit ahead of the UTEP Miners by the time we roll around to week 6. Moving on to number 10, that's the Wyoming Cowboys. So this is the first conference game, the first Mountain West game for San Jose State on the season. This happens in week 5. It's the homecoming game, Friday, October the 9th. San Jose State will be playing with some revenge in this game because the game last year in Laramie between SJSU and Wyoming was one to forget if you were a Spartan fan, because SJSU was up 17 points up 14 points at the end of the third quarter. And then the sky ended up falling in the fourth quarter. Just kind of some Laramie magic. And we've seen those games before where, Wyoming just all of a sudden is just, off the chain offensively and playing with their hearts out defensively as always. And they just kind of steal of a game out of nowhere. And that was a game that San Jose State lost, but a game that Wyoming won as well, 35-28. Out of all the games that San Jose State lost last year, and they lost a lot of heartbreakers. Remember, they went 3-9 a year ago. That one was probably the toughest game. And I'd have to really think about that. But that's the one that stands out to me, that they lost last year, because it was on the road. They come out firing with some Danny Scudero touchdowns. I mean, Scudero had 4 touchdowns in the first half himself. I mean, that looked like a blowout written all over it. And somehow, this team lost the game outright. It was just one of the, the sillier games I think that we had all of 2025 in the Mountain West Conference. And, it involved San Jose State and Wyoming. So regardless, of all of that, San Jose State will be playing with revenge. It helps that this game is in San Jose, and I think that's why I have it at number 10. Because even though Wyoming has some personnel changes this year and some coaching changes, and I think the offense is going to look much different, it seems like, and this is going back to the Craig Bowl era as well, when you get Wyoming on the road, you just don't know what you're going to get. It's really that simple. Because, and you can even go back to the Josh Allen days and stuff. There'd be games where, Josh Allen would come out and then he'd just be a turnover machine on the road. Obviously with Caden Anderson last year and Evan Svoboda the year before. And, even when they had Andrew Peasley, the offense just wouldn't look right. And Wyoming would always have to win a certain way on the road. And that would be in 13-10 ugly fashion. And I just think when you have an air raid like San Jose State and it'll be on their home turf, it's going to be very difficult for Wyoming to keep up with. Because even though Wyoming has some very interesting personnel changes in specific at quarterback and offensive coordinator, their wide receiver room won't be the same. John Michael Gillenborg ended up going pro, their star tight end from a year ago, right? So there's still some questions to be answered. We already know that they're going to bring a really good defense. We already know that their offensive line and their ground game is going to be something that they rely on. But can their quarterback, who's expected to start, dual threat quarterback from William and Mary, Tyler Hughes, be the answer? Because this is a guy that accounted for 30 total touchdowns, 20 passing, 11 on the ground at the FCS level. Can that translate to Laradice? Now, it certainly helps that they're bringing in a guy that he's very familiar with, offensive coordinator Christian Taylor. He replaces Jay Johnson. Spent time with the Buffalo Bills a couple of years ago for 2 years prior to this year. But that was on the defensive side of the ball. But this is where things get interesting. Christian Taylor, the offensive coordinator, and quarterback Tyler Hughes ended up spending 2 seasons together for William and Mary at the FCS level. So it certainly helps that there is, some continuity between the OC and the quarterback. That's why I do believe Hughes will be the quarterback if he already hasn't even been announced as the starter. I think he will be the starter by the time we roll around to week 1, of course, just because of the familiarity between those two guys. And Wyoming, they just need way better quarterback play than what we saw. But again, this is in week 5. This is the first conference game at home. This is going to be, I would imagine because of, just being the homecoming game, you're going to have some, some notable alumni here. And this game will be lit. For SJSU standards, this will probably be one of the better attended home games of the season. And it's a Friday night game, so you're going to be on the primetime slot. But this is a big year for Jay Sawvell out there in Laramie in year 3. They got to make a bowl game, Wyoming. And I think it's a critical year for, some teams in the Mountain West. I think Wyoming is one of them, just because they got to get things back rolling. They haven't been as dangerous as at home. And, they got to be way more consistent on the road. And we haven't seen that over the past couple of years. So that's number 10, the Wyoming Cowboys. Number 9, let's go to the Eastern Michigan Eagles. Now you're probably thinking, whoa, Nick, you got this Wyoming team at number 10, and you got two other first-time Mountain West teams lower on the scale than this Eastern Michigan team. Yeah, this Eastern Michigan team only won 5 games last year under Chris Creighton. But I think this is a dangerous game for San Jose State just because of the spot and situation. Remember, they play in week 0 at USC, and then 6 days later, they're playing in Ypsilanti, Michigan. And who knows what comes out of that USC game. They, probably will lose the game. But maybe the offense gets off on a good note. Maybe their defense has to make adjustments. But Chris Creighton, it's a critical year for him as well. In Ypsilanti, he's had, several losing seasons. In fact, I don't think he's had himself a winning season since the 2022 season, which was his best, out there in Ypsilanti, because he ended up winning like 9 or 10 games in the 2022 season. And San Jose State and Eastern Michigan ended up playing in the 2022 famous Idaho Potato Bowl that year. And that Eastern Michigan was very reliant on their ground game. Obviously, that bowl game was very wonky. Like, we had ourselves like an extra point blocked return for back the other way for a score. Like, it was weird. Like most bowl games, they become out of control. And in some funny aspects as well. But that was a really good Eastern Michigan team. And, now EMU is going to be bringing back their quarterback, Noah Kim. Defensively, they were kind of a mess last year. Offensively, they were able to put up some points in some spots in MAC play. But to me, this is just a dangerous game just based on the spot. And the fact that it's the season opener for Eastern Michigan as well, we can argue it both ways, right? Like, does it help that Eastern Michigan has tape on San Jose State with their new roster for week 0, and San Jose State really doesn't have EMU tape because they haven't played a game yet? I just think, but 6 days off the USC game to travel across the country. This is a Friday night game. Like, this is more, I think this is more of a dangerous game than what people make it out to be. We should mention as well that San Jose State just doesn't really have a good track record overall versus the MAC, the Mid-American Conference. They're looking for their first win versus the conference since 2022 and their first ever win in a MAC venue. Remember, San Jose State ended up playing at like Toledo a couple years ago, and that was a game that they had a lead in and ultimately lost the game outright. So we've kind of had some weird games versus the MAC. SJSU has, like, they played Ball State in a bowl game, like back in 2020. These games are just never easy. It's incredibly hard to explain, but that's Maction for you. And the fact that this game's on the road, I think off, just such a short time between the USC game is very interesting. And it's a dangerous game that I had circled from pretty much since the official schedule was, set in stone, because this is a critical year for the EMU football program. And, this could most certainly be a swing game. And I think that's why, if you start out 0-2, and then you're coming back home for the season opener versus Cal Poly, it could be very reminiscent of the 2023 season, for the San Jose State Cal Poly game. But that's my number 9, Eastern Michigan Eagles. This is the week 1 matchup out there in Ypsilanti. Number 8, let's go to the Hawaii Rainbow Warriors. Now you're probably thinking, whoa, number 8, we got this one, not even towards the middle or right at the middle. This is a big game for San Jose State and the coaching staff. I know you talk to a lot of the coaches, and I've talked to Coach Ken, and they always like to downplay it, and that's fine. But this is a big game just because it's week 4, I believe. I think I might have that wrong. Might be a little bit later. Oh no, this is week 4, Saturday, October 4th. But this game's on the road on the island. It's the first Mountain West game of the season. For San Jose State. So you're going to get off Mountain West play, coming off the Fresno State game. San Jose State's going to be coming off the bye as well. So extra time to prepare for a scheme that Craig Stutzman and Coach Ken are already familiar with in the run and shoot. They're going to have plenty of tape on Micah Alejado because he's back and he's the Mountain West Freshman of the Year. They can go back and look at the tape from last year's San Jose State win over Hawaii back in San Jose. That was a 45-38 shootout that featured over 1,000 yards of offense. We mentioned Alejado returns for Hawaii, but they bring back Cam Barfield and Pofele Ashlock. Ashlock's been there for like 4 years now. They do lose Jackson Harris, who was the guy that torched them in last year's game in San Jose. He's at LSU now. And overall, I just think like this is a game like Coach Ken and Timmy Chang are very close friends. They're always excited to play each other and see each other. And this is a game that I think Ken Niumatalolo, especially off the bye, I don't want to say this is like the Super Bowl spot, but this is a game that this is going to be an all hands on deck game that, they're going to be totally ready for. And of course, we already know, if you keep tabs on the San Jose State program, they have deep recruiting ties in this area, just on the Hawaiian Islands. So they're going to have a big turnout for this game. And this is Ken Niumatalolo's first trip to the island as San Jose State's head coach playing versus Hawaii. So I think there's something to that as well. And Hawaii, very senior heavy on the defense last year. So as you would imagine, they graduated a lot of guys. They lost 3 of their top 4 corners, lost both safeties. They lost their defensive line coach, Jeff Reinbold, to the CFL. They bring back Jemai Otis, their star linebacker. But still, something I will be most certainly paying attention to, especially because it's the first Mountain West game of the season. But what does that Hawaii defense look like? That's the biggest question mark. We know they're going to put up points. We know San Jose State's going to put up points. But the better defense is going to win this game, and the better defense in the form in week 4 is going to be crucial for this game. But I just think SJSU off the bye will be most certainly ready for this game, and that's why it's number 8 in my book. Number 7, let's go to Nevada Wolfpack. This was the game, and this has always been the game for the San Jose State program that has always been tough. It doesn't matter the state of the program for Nevada. It doesn't matter if they're at their lowest of lows, and it doesn't matter if, they were at the ultimate ceiling, right? The Jeff Choate era enters year 3 out there in Reno, and it's been a tough start to the Jeff Choate era the first 2 years because their head coach is 6-19 overall. 6-19. It's been tough. It's been tough to recruit. It's been tough to gain consistency in several areas, and in particular at the quarterback position. This is a week 7 matchup in Reno. It's the second leg of a road trip for San Jose State. They'll be playing UTEP the week prior, and this is a game on Saturday, October 24th. If anybody was still keeping tabs on the SJSU season in 2025, towards the second to the last week of the season or third to last, this was probably the worst loss of the year. I said the Wyoming game, that was probably the most heartbreaking loss. No, this one was the worst because this was 55-10 L for SJSU. This was ultimately the game where this was the game where pretty much everybody got fired, where a lot of coaching changes were made, where it was kind of really the last straw. You were eliminated from bowl eligibility. Like this was kind of like this was the last straw for the SJSU season. And it was quite honestly it was embarrassing. It was embarrassing on every level, on every dimension, in every phase of the game. Because that Nevada team started to pick up some steam towards the back end of the year. But man, they were just not a good football team, and they just went up and down the field in all areas. Special teams touchdowns, a few pick sixes. SJSU, I think, played 3 quarterbacks in the game. It was just a mess. And I don't need to remind anybody of it if you watched the game, because it was a tough watch, of course. But why is this number 7? Is because San Jose State, doesn't matter what game, San Jose State versus Nevada, no matter where you play, it's always going to be tough. And especially in Reno, because San Jose State hasn't won in Reno since the 2000 season. Now Nevada, I'm interested to see what they look like this year. Can they take the next step? They have a very dangerous non-conference, just like last year. Like they're playing Western Kentucky again. They're playing Middle Tennessee again. I think they're playing Montana State, like the defending FCS national champions in Reno. Like it's just, it's just a dangerous non-conference where I could just see the sky falling to start the season yet again. And then they're just kind of, playing in quicksand, trying to get back to 500 the rest of the year, this team. Now, the good news is that they bring back Carter Jones. He was grossly inconsistent. He was a true freshman, kind of just thrown into the fire with no real weapons outside of, a couple of running backs last year. So it's very tough, as you might imagine. And the good news is, on the other side of the ball, Dylan LaBarrera, their star defensive lineman, is back for his senior season in Reno. So again, there's some things to like hang your hat on here. They got a running back returning, like they got an offensive lineman returning, but I think this is going to be another tough year for Nevada. But the deal is that Jeff Choate, regardless of the record, is going to hit San Jose State with his best shot. I have to say, the former Montana State head coach and Jeff Choate is very good in game planning for the air raid offense. Very good. We saw him in what he did to the Spartans last year. 2 years ago, he came to Reno, and that was the game that Emmett Brown ended up getting benched. And that was when Walker Eggett kind of eclipsed as the starting quarterback in year 1 of the Coach Ken era. And even if you go back to week 0, 2 years ago, when it was Jeff Choate's first ever game that he coached with Nevada, he ended up playing the SMU Mustangs, the same SMU team that ended up playing in the college football playoff that year. And that was a very up-tempo air raid offense that SMU was running with Preston Stone, and ended up being Kevin Jennings. And they were running like a little 2-quarterback system at the time there 2 years ago. And he had himself a very good game plan in that game. So would I be shocked if San Jose State lost this game in week 7? Absolutely not. because I do think Jeff Choate is going to have his guys ready regardless of the record. Defensively, they'll have their ears pinned back, and they'll be ready to roll. And I could just see this when we're previewing the game in week 7. It could just be, one of these games that go, I wouldn't say off the rails, but we just kind of see some unscripted stuff, right? Like, a defensive touchdown, special teams touchdown, just like last year. I do think it'll be a closer game, but this is a game that I always have circled every year, just because it's always a tough one, whether it's in San Jose or not, or it's in Reno. It's always a tough game when these two teams get together. And, for the most part, it's a pretty entertaining one. So number 7, San Jose State versus Nevada, Saturday, October 24th. Let's move on to number 6, and that being the Fresno State Bulldogs. Okay, so Fresno State. The spot here is pretty tough here for San Jose State just because it is their 4th game in 4 weeks, and there is no bye. Now, they play this game, and then they have the bye, and then they play Hawaii. So there is that. But when you're coming off, the first 2 games on the road and then the Cal Poly game, it would probably be nice if you could, if the Cal Poly game is one-sided enough in week technically 2, but their 3rd game of the year for the Spartans. If the game's lopsided enough in the Spartans' favor, you could kind of rest your starters and get some of your underclassmen in there. So, you could get some of your guys some much needed rest. But this is a rivalry game, and the game's in San Jose, and this is the battle for the Valley. And this is the first, battle for the Valley since the realignment that just happened. So this is not going to be a game that gets played every year, but I have to say kudos to both programs for playing this game still. Because Fresno State could have just said, the hell with this. We're just going to go, schedule somebody else and play, a Power 4 on the road, or, host ourselves another respectable G5, right? So, there's different elements to this. And, I always just say, hey, rivalries are important. Regionality is important. For college athletics and college football, you just love, when 2 teams that don't like each other get together and settle it on the field, right? And that's what we got in week 4 versus Fresno State. The game is in San Jose, which certainly helps. Fresno State wants 2 of the last 3 games, including the 41-14 win last year in San Jose. And, that game was ugly and for the last battle for the Valley in the Mountain West. But at the same point in time, I do think that score was a little bit misleading. A lot of turnovers. The defense under coach Bojay Filiamatu, the full-time defensive coordinator now, the end ended up being a really good, I shouldn't say really good defense performance, because it wasn't. You allowed, north of 40 points, but a lot of those came off short fields and turnovers and things like that. And it was just a more inspiring defense compared to what you saw the first, 11 weeks of the season, right? Now, Fresno State, they got their head coach, Matt Entz. Matt Entz, second year in the Central Valley, ended up having a terrific year 1 in the Central Valley. 9 wins in 2025. Fresno State was, very much a ground and pound type team. We're going to rely on our offensive line, and we're going to let our running backs go. They had inconsistency at the quarterback spot last year. They were throwing in Carson Conklin, the former Sac State Hornet, along with E.J. Warner, who exhausted all of his eligibility, so he's not back this year, and the former Rice Temple Owl before Fresno State. They were all over the place at the quarterback spot. But to a certain extent, it really didn't matter because their offensive line and their run game was so good, and their defense was consistent enough to get some big-time stops in Mountain West play last year. I don't expect any of that to change because the Bulldogs return their top 3 running backs with Bryson Donaldson and Rayshawn Luke and Brian Ramirez. So they're going to be just fine at the running back spot, and I expect them to run the ball 40 times a game in this game and all year in the Pac-12. But the quarterback spot to be determined right now. Christian Martin comes over from Maryland. They got Jaden Mandel, who's been in their quarterback pipeline for some time now. And then one of their high-level recruits, Deegan Rose, true freshman, competing for the job as well. So Fresno's probably not going to announce a quarterback till week 1, so keep an eye on that. But the running backs are, I think, the true story in this game. And it's a rivalry game. It's in San Jose. This game will be lit. Fresno fans will travel to it. They'll make the drive over the Pacheco Pass to come see their Bulldogs play. And you already know San Jose State will have a respectable turnout themselves in their own building. So I'm just glad that we're getting this game. But this is also a Fresno State team. I think when you look back on it, win or loss, I think they're going to be a good team in the new Pac-12 this year. Just because they have themselves an identity. And I do think they have a good coach in Matt Entz. So rivalry game, it's going to be high on the scale. San Jose State's going to be an underdog in it, most certainly. But I think it's going to be a good game as a whole, no matter where you play it. Moving on to number 5, let's go to the North Dakota State Bison. Now remember, we said off the top, this is a non-conference game. This is the last game of the year. And you're probably thinking, why is this number 5? And because North Dakota State really doesn't have themselves a proven resume to a certain extent with the full season at the FBS level. And yes, I agree, but I'm telling you, this is going to be a really good team, North Dakota State. First and foremost, their head coach. In fact, this has kind of been a program that's been head coaching proof. Whether it was the previous head coach we just talked about, and Matt Entz, he won a national championship, an FCS championship with the North Dakota State Bison. Now they got Tim Polasek, who spent some time at Wyoming. He was their offensive coordinator there under Craig Bull. He comes over here to Fargo, North Dakota, and he already has a national championship, an FCS championship in his resume. His 3 losses in his career, first and foremost, he's 26-3 in his first 2 seasons at North Dakota State. And his 3 losses have come by a combined 7 points. Just incredible. And one of those was an FBS loss at Colorado, which, again, they probably should have won. And they lost out South Dakota, rivalry game. And then the Illinois State game was just kind of the ultimate anomaly. We talked about the Illinois State FCS run last year in the playoffs. I mean, North Dakota State had like a 3-possession lead in the game in the fourth quarter, and Illinois State on the road in Fargo, in the Fargo Dome, came all the way back and won the game outright. If you haven't seen those highlights, I advise go watch them. It's pretty nuts. But North Dakota State, this is going to be a good program that I think is going to have some instant impact as far as winning in the Mountain West this year. Now, it's unfortunate that they're not eligible for any of the postseason stuff, but this is why I have it as number 5, is because of that. And the fact that they're ineligible for the Mountain West Championship. This game in San Jose will practically be their Super Bowl because they're going to have a dual threat quarterback in Nathan Hayes, who's an upperclassman. And there's going to be tons of guys that are going to essentially be playing their final game of the season and of their college career. And it's going to be in San Jose. So this is going to be, regardless of the record, regardless of how good or bad they are in 2026, this will be a max effort football game that they're going to bring to the Bay Area. And they're going to have the dual threat quarterback in Hayes, who's, been a dual threat quarterbacks as a whole, have been, tough, just for San Jose State's defense. The way that they, have their base defense set up. It's been tough to guard and tough to stop over the years. Those third downs are always crucial, as we know. But this is going to be a really good football team. So when you throw in a good football team and the fact that it'll be, their last game of the season, I was forced to put it this high. And North Dakota State just generally has, I put it down, but they have a 9-5 record versus the FBS as FCS members. So when they do go play, those FBS teams, when they were, still a subdivision lower, they brought it. and they were winning games, pretty handily as well. They weren't escaping by the skin of their teeth. They were winning games with margin. This is a really good team, and they have themselves a really good head coach in Tim Polasek that I think a lot of people just nationally are going to learn about this year. And who knows, this could be a guy that I wouldn't be shocked in 2 years that he has himself like a gig at like a power four. I think he's that legit. They're that offensively well schemed and disciplined. And, we should mention as well, this North Dakota State team has got themselves a real football budget. They're all in on football. And I think that's what people are going to see here, that North Dakota State is going to come in year one in the Mountain West, and they're going to make some real noise just because they're not like that typical FCS team that takes a few years to transition. They're going to be ready. They're going to, probably win 8-9 games, and it's going to be a tough game for San Jose State, regardless of when this game was going to be on the schedule. We should mention this was a game that was not initially on the schedule, like around March, April timeframe, just because that's the way it aligned. But this is the Jacksonville State replacement game from the non-conference, and they just plopped it here at the end of the year. So that's where we're at with that. Very excited to see North Dakota State in person, this season and monitor what they're all about. Number 4, let's go to the Air Force Falcons. Yes. We always love ourselves a good San Jose State and Air Force game because they've been really good games over the years. Air Force, now, they're coming off a really, I would say, disappointing season. And you don't really often say that under Troy Calhoun, who's entering year 20 as the Air Force head coach. Believe it or not, still searching for his first Mountain West title. But Air Force is just one of these teams that always bounces back after back-to-back losing seasons. First time that's happened since 2017 and 2018, but even after a subpar year, they more often than not bounce back. So the fact that they were 4-8 in 2025 and had themselves a lousy 2024 for their standards, this has got to be the breakout candidate of the Mountain West this year, if you ask me. As far as who's going to make the biggest jump as far as win improvement, I would say probably the Air Force Falcons. Mainly because they're returning their star quarterback in Liam Zarka. If you didn't see Liam Zarka play last year for the Air Force Falcons, man, did you miss out, because he was navigating a very dangerous offense. And it was very different for Air Force's perspective, because when they were trailing in games, and they were trailing a lot more than what they wanted to, this was the first time since I've been watching, Air Force and monitoring their program, where, when they were down a touchdown or 10 points or 14 points, whatever the situation was, because they had Liam Zarka at quarterback, there was just a certain, I guess, belief watching through my TV screen, like, okay, this guy has the capabilities of bringing a team back from, a deficit. And you haven't been able to say that over the years with the previous Air Force quarterbacks, no disrespect to them, just because they don't have, the throwing ability, or they were so accustomed to the scheme. And then when they'd be in obvious passing downs late in games and, in the 2-minute no huddle offense, their quarterbacks weren't capable of getting them down the field 80 plus yards in the span of a minute. They can do that with Zarka. He's got a cannon arm. He's got the capabilities of escaping the pocket and scampering for 40 yards upfield and turning an explosive. That way, they have a running back in Owen Allen, who's going to be getting a bulk of their carries in the backfield this year. And when you combine Zarka and Allen with 3 starters back on the offensive line, on top of Troy Calhoun at head coach, on top of what's just top to bottom as well, just an easier Mountain West schedule for them this year. To me, I think this is going to be a very tough game. And the fact that it's in Colorado Springs always just makes it even tougher, just because of the altitude, and Air Force typically plays better, and the triple option is just more often than not firing uh, at a higher level when they're in their own building. Now, the deal is with this game, and why I could see a lot of Air Force fans saying this could be the trap door special for on their schedule when San Jose State comes to town, is because they play at West Point versus the Army Black Knights the week prior. And we all know the Commander-in-Chief rivalry is more important than any other game on their schedule. When they play Army, when they play Navy, those are the games that they ultimately care about the most. As much as when we talk to Troy Calhoun in over a month from now, he won't say that. But it's the biggest game on their schedule. And you could just totally see it when Air Force goes on the road, and potentially wins the game at Army, at Mikey Stadium. That could be, just a game the following week when they play San Jose State. We're going back to, our neck of the woods, and it could just be a little bit of a tricky game. It might be a game for 3.5 quarters. You never know, but it's at number 4 just because of the continuity on offense for the Air Force Falcon. All right, progressing to number 3 on our schedule rankings, we got the UNLV Rebels. Now, UNLV entering year 2 in the Dan Mullen era after just a fantastic year 1 for Mullen, winning 10 games last year, ultimately losing in the Mountain West title game, which you can argue they shouldn't have even been there in the first place, along with Boise State. Probably should have been New Mexico and San Diego State. But we had all that tiebreaker mess that I really don't even want to get into right now. But regardless, they were in the Mountain West title game, lost to Boise again. But now San Jose State gets to host UNLV this year. They didn't play last year. They played the year before in San Jose. The game was a monsoon, and it was a game with that UNLV, I think, won by like 2 possessions. And it was just a very ugly game because it was the ugliest weather game that the Bay Area had. It was probably the wettest day of the entire calendar year in like 2024, and it just happened to be on a Friday night when San Jose State and UNLV were playing a critical game in the Mountain West. But that was before the Dan Mullen era, and we're in it now. And I think it's going to be another good year for UNLV's football team. Help set this game's in San Jose during week 11. So you expect both teams to be in full form here, on both sides of the ball. Week 11, Saturday, November 21st. UNLV replacing the quarterback, as you might imagine, with Mountain West Offensive Player of the Year, Anthony Calandria. He went portaling and now will be the starting quarterback, you would imagine, at Nebraska this year. But what does UNLV go do? They're going to just go reload at quarterback. They bring in quarterback Jackson Arnold. And I know what a lot of people are probably thinking. Oh, no, Jackson Arnold. This guy was a true freshman that got thrown into the fuel of the fire at Oklahoma when things were going hairy with their quarterback situation. Didn't work. Hit the portal, went to Auburn. Then he had to deal with the whole Hugh Freeze situation at Auburn, and that didn't work out, right, at the SEC. But now he gets to hit the reset button once and for all. And now he gets to leave the entire SEC, and he gets to come over to the Mountain West, where there's not as much pressure on him. Remember, this is still a 5-star quarterback, and he's got dual threat capabilities, just like Anthony Calandria. Dan Mullen has always kind of been a quarterback whisperer as well. Like, he is going to buy low on a lot of these quarterbacks that have been at multiple stops. That's basically what he did with a healthy portion of his roster. Remember, this guy coached at Florida. He recruited a lot of these players when he was back at his Florida Gator days. So when you look at this roster from top to bottom for UNLV, there is a lot of guys on this list that have been on their second, third school trying to figure it out, and he unlocks them. And it's no different here at the quarterback position. I think Jackson Arnold's going to have himself a good year. Now, is it going to be Anthony Calandria numbers? Probably not, because Calandria was responsible for over 30 touchdowns and 3,500 yards when you put the passing and rushing numbers together. And they only scored 34 a game. Could they replicate that? Maybe. I would say those numbers probably tick down a little bit. But I do think this is going to still be a really good UNLV football team from top to bottom. The Rebels do have themselves a notable returner coming back, and that's their running back, Jaden Thomas, a.k.a. Jet, that they call him out there in the desert. He was responsible for over 1,000 rushing yards and 13 total touchdowns last year. This guy is a weapon when he gets the ball. And when he's got a strong mesh point, he can go. And I was saying a lot of times during my, podcast last year when we come and recap the UNLV games at the end of the weekend, and we'd say, where are the Jaden Thomas touches? And I just thought he wasn't getting enough touches despite the production that he had statistically. And I'm interested to see, do those numbers tick up a little bit? Now, it certainly helped that they had Anthony Calandria, running around like crazy. I think the situation could kind of be the same because Jackson Arnold has those, running capabilities as well when the play breaks down. But I'm interested to see how that plays out with the Jaden Thomas, touches on a week-to-week basis. Scheduling spot here for UNLV. San Jose State gets the Rebels after the Rebels road game in New Mexico. So this will be the second leg of a road trip for UNLV. It'll start out at New Mexico and then go to San Jose. That is expected to be, as you might imagine, in week 10, it's going to be a high leverage Mountain West game in Albuquerque. You'd expect the place to be sold out. You're going to be jockeying for standings. It could be a Mountain West championship rematch for all we know, just given the state of those rosters and programs and what they did last year, and from a power ranking standpoint. So that could be a very physical game versus Jason X Group. And whether it's a win or loss, San Jose State could be catching UNLV at a better situation than what it could made out to be based on, the New Mexico game just being such a highly, rated game in the Mountain West season. So that is something that you could totally, circle the wagons for when you come to this game in week 11. But this is going to be a tough game. This is going to be a tough game. I will say, between this game and the next game, and we talk about if SJSU can go 1-1, I think that would be respectable, because these are two tough games. Between this game and the next game we're going to talk about are very tough. And I'm interested to see what UNLV's defense looks like. That to me might be the bigger question mark. I think UNLV's offense will be just fine. They're going to put up tons of numbers again, no matter who's on their, offensive, whoever's out there. Wide receiver, running back with Thomas. Arnold's going to throw for tons of yards. Their non-conference is much tougher this year. Like they're playing Cal and Memphis, and I think they're on the road at Akron. Tricky game once again in the non-conference. So there is that. But the Mountain West schedule, I think that tough non-conference will prepare them for the Mountain West schedule. But defensively, I'm interested to see what this team looks like, because they lose their sack artist from last year on the defensive line. Marcel McDuffie's not back. They lose Amaris Brown, who won several Mountain West Defensive Player of the Week awards, right? So they're just losing a lot of blue chippers on their defense. And I'm interested to just see who steps up for them and, what their defense looks like, over the course, as the season of the 2026 season progresses. So that's number 3. And number 2 is the New Mexico Lobos. Now, you could argue back and forth between both, between New Mexico and UNLV. I love their head coaches. They're great personalities. They're great to conversate football with. But to me, I just like what New Mexico has coming back. The Lobos travel to San Jose. Now, that's the thing, too. These two games might be highly rated on the ranking, on my rankings list, number 2 and number 3. I say if you go 1-1 in this stretch and you get both of the heavyweights, what we all expect in San Jose. That's pretty big. If you had both of these games on the road, I would be a little bit worried, as you might imagine. But the fact that you get both of these games in the Bay Area, I think is good for the San Jose State team this year. Now the Lobos travel to San Jose during week 8. This is a game that's on Halloween. Mountain West Coach of the Year, Jason Eck, is back for a second season in Albuquerque. Finished 9-4 in 2025. And he was getting big win after big win. At the time, scored a massive upset versus UCLA, or at UCLA rather, in Westwood. That was just kind of like, hey, New Mexico's here, and like they're not just, just a fold-up chair anymore. This is a real program, and they got themselves a real coach. And even at Michigan, week 1, they passed the eye test. What really impresses me about Jason Eck's teams is not only like they are really well disciplined. Sure, the penalties racked up towards the second half of the season, but Eck will always have his players ready, and most importantly, he'll come ready for every situation. He has trick plays installed for a package, for certain packages. That's what made James Lobstein so dangerous last year, which was practically their backup quarterback, but they'd bring him in on any down and distance, and he'd be able to make a throw, but more importantly, stretch out the field and make plays with his legs, on top of what Jack Lane was doing with his, arm himself. So Jason Eck, like, he's going to be ready for this game. And the fact that San Jose State won this game 31-25, New Mexico didn't play a good game at all in that one. And they only lost the game by 10, because San Jose State forced 3 turnovers in that game. And New Mexico, New Mexico lost that game by 10 in San Jose last year. But Jason Eck, I was watching his fourth quarter and what he was doing on the sidelines late in games. Like, man, they were getting some big stops. They had opportunities to come back. He played like the timeout situation perfect, on top of like the 2-minute timeout. Like, Jason Eck is not going to lose this team games. That's why ultimately I think, whether it's at the end of this year or if he stays another year in New Mexico, this guy's due for a bigger job. And that's no disrespect to New Mexico. I love the Lobo program. We got tons of, fans and listeners and people that tune into our content all the time, that follow New Mexico football and basketball. But man, I think Jason Eck, man, this guy is the real freaking deal. And that's why he won Mountain West Coach of the Year last year. And that's why in a year or two from now, he's not going to be here, because, he's going to be coaching for a Power 4 team when it's all said and done. And he's going to be winning over there too. So the Lobos, to me, if I'm making a list right now, if I'm saying, hey, who's the team to beat in the Mountain West this year, it's the New Mexico Lobos, because when you combine both quarterbacks, Jack Lane and James Lobstein, coming back, Scott Trey Humphrey had himself, the running back for New Mexico, had himself a little bit of a down year, but this is, I'd imagine, going to be his full backfield. Damon Bankston not with the team anymore. I think he graduated, but on defense as well. They bring in Coach Jason Eck's son back, Jackson Eck, who was the co-defensive player of the year in the league last year. They bring back Mercury Swaim, one of their blue chippers at the linebacker spot. Tavion Combs, who had big interception after big interception last year. Austin Brawley, who played 3 games and he has 4 picks, the former Ohio Bobcat who was injured most of the year. They just got tons of, pieces on every level that have been with the program. I would say their most notable loss that hit the portal this year was Dorian Thomas, their tight end. But their wide receivers are still respectable as well. They weren't guys that were going to wow you with a Jackson Harris or a Pofele Ashlock, but they get the job done for you. And that's why I think New Mexico, when we're looking at the rosters today, they're power ranked as my best team in the Mountain West, as we stand here right now. And then of course, number 1, just because it's going to be the hardest game on the schedule, of course, It's the USC Trojans. It's week 0. It's a primetime spot for SJSU. This is the game that you're going to begin the 2026 campaign with at LA Memorial Coliseum. It's week 0. It's on NBC at high noon. You're playing Lincoln Riley again. It's year 5 with him under the helm in Southern California. He had, I would probably say, his most impressive year since he got the job, just because of the Big Ten gauntlet that he had to go through. 9-4 and 7-2 in Big Ten play. They're bringing back Jaden Mayava back, 3rd season. Remember, the former UNLV recruit. Yep, he's still here at USC. Put up monster numbers with, Makai Lemon and Jacoby Lane, who are in the NFL. But this is USC, and this is Lincoln Riley that we're talking about. They're going to still have 4 5-star guys everywhere you look. Their freshman class, as you imagine, is, absolutely awesome. They only brought in like an NC State transfer. I think it's Terrell Anderson, who's like one of their older guys. So he might be their wide receiver 1. But this is Lincoln Riley's offense, and it's going to be Craig Stutzman's offense on the other side. So as much as this is going to probably be, a tough game to win, I think San Jose State's like a 4-touchdown underdog, which, if you ask me, might be a little bit heavy as we talk here at the end of June, 2 months away from the matchup, because San Jose State, I do believe, is going to put up some points in this game. We saw it when they had, when they went to week 0 in 2023, they hung 28 points. Now they lost the game by 28 because USC had, Jordan Addison and Zachariah Branch as a true freshman. Like, they had, as you'd imagine, really good pieces on offense. And they had, of course, the Heisman Trophy winner, Caleb Williams, that year. And that's why they hung 56. So could USC hang 50 on San Jose State's defense again? Yes. But I think San Jose State in this game could hang, 28 themselves again. That's why it's number 1 on the schedule, just because it's going to be the hardest game on the schedule to realistically pull off an upset with. And again, it's week 0. Like, this is not the end of the world. If you lose this game, you get to, that's the beauty of, you play a week 0 game. You get to go back to the drawing board, get yourself ready for Eastern Michigan in week 1. Because the Mountain West games is what ultimately is going to hold more weight than this week 0 game versus USC. Now, if you win at USC, I mean, yeah, you're going to set the world on fire, and Twitter's going to be all over the place. But realistically speaking, this is not a game that you're expected to win. That's why it's number 1 on the list. While we're talking here. So it's going to be a tough game. And, does it help that it comes at week 0? Absolutely not. Because I do believe this was a game that was not supposed to be on the schedule. USC was looking for people, to play, and everybody agreed to it. And that's just the way it went. And this is much better. This is a much more desirable matchup. This week 0 game at USC compared to the week 1 game at Texas last year. Like, this is not going to be one of those games where it's going to be over midway through the first quarter. Sure, USC is probably going to come off and rip 14 points early, but I'd expect San Jose State to have some punchback in this game. You have 2 dynamic offensive play callers with Lincoln Riley and Craig Stutzman. So I think it's going to be an entertaining game, even though I think we expect USC to probably win this game by, a couple possessions. So again, I think what San Jose State fans and Mountain West fans should be looking for in that game in particular. Sure, can you be flirting versus USC for as long as possible for an outright win? Yes. But let's see what the starting quarterback, versus what we'd expect, a really good physical Big Ten defense. Can you move the sticks against them? How do the wide receivers look? Like, this is going to be all about, hey, who are your players on defense? Like, this is going to be much more of a player evaluation game for me, more so than, hey, let's go try and, score the upset of our lives. Because this needs to be a momentum builder for the game in Ypsilanti in week 1, a game that you do have to win on the road. So that's where I'm at with that. Again, a 13-game schedule for San Jose State. They got their easy spots. They got their favorable spots against some good teams. And then they got, of course, some games where, are going to be some tough ones for them. So, you can argue both ways. I'm interested. Hey, if you want to come chime in, do you agree with me on some of these games? Again, this is just my opinion, my analysis on it. Again, we're going to be talking about all these games on a week-to-week basis when we get to them for the San Jose State schedule. But, hey, just wanted to come on here. End of June, give everybody a little update. We said when we did our spring game breakdown, like, okay, we're going to take a deeper dive into the schedule because I wanted to and get everybody aware and up to speed on the Spartans' opponents this year because it's 2026 in college football. So much is going to change from the previous season. Coaches move, quarterbacks are on the move. Everybody's on the move these days. And again, I don't have a full breakdown on that just because there was just so much research that I'm still in the midst of doing. But between, some angles here and some notable returners that we quickly digged up that are coming back for certain teams, thought I'd throw them in there for everybody. So that's going to do it for this episode of the Sports Sentiment. We got Mountain West Media Days that we'll be attending in Las Vegas next month. We'll have an NBA draft reaction podcast coming out later in the week with the guest. So stay tuned for that. We'll also have some San Jose State men's basketball updates in the month of July and some very exciting stuff planned there in the books that I can't share just yet, but we'll be rolling around and you'll be seeing it. So as always, keep it locked in here on the podcast, youtube.com/@thesportsentiment. If you're on the audio side, always appreciate you as well. Should mention for anybody listening on the audio side, if you wanted to see the graphics that I made for the YouTube audience, that is available at your disposal, youtube.com/@thesportsentiment. We'll be back again with more college football, college basketball, very shortly. So keep that notification bell on the YouTube side and on the audio side, of course. But once again, I'm your host, Nick Urias, and be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcast.